Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Eric Larson Day. It is Saturday, so we're looking at the next issue in his creator-owned series, The Savage Dragon, that I've been reviewing. This is issue number 37, cover dated April 1997. So just looking at this cover, I had not guessed it. I was not aware of the contents of this issue before this review, or before looking through it before this review. I originally stopped buying The Savage Dragon somewhere around issues 8 or 9, somewhere around there. So there's a good 20 plus issues that we've been looking at that are kind of new and fresh to me. I've said before, I think it's probably the best Image series, the most kind of Marvel-esque in keeping your interest and having good writing and plot lines continuing from issue to issue, and stuff coming back that you thought maybe he'd forgotten about. Plot lines get resolved a lot later, and there's kind of a really kind of wide story arc, not just the A story, right, with the Savage Dragon, whatever's going on with him, but a lot of B, C, D, E, F, G alphabet stories going on around him with secondary characters from the series. And in this one, I had no idea, but, it's 1997. The bubble has definitely burst for a few years now, and I guess sales are really kind of dropping. Just conjuring up stories as well. Eric Larson right now is on issue 37, and he's been consistent and monthly pretty much, I think, throughout pretty much all of this run. So, you got to get your story ideas where you can get them. And, even though he establishes all of these subplots that keep going on, I'm sure he runs out of ideas every once in a while, has a bit of writer's block. And so I found out with the contents of this issue, once we look inside, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a little hint down here that this actually relates to a 90s crossover. So I'll just talk about the cover real quick, and then we'll open up and have a look. So this is a character that's going to be introduced in this issue right away. I'm very intrigued. I think Larson draws great monsters, does kind of great body horror weird stuff as well, and weird ideas that I find interesting. So clearly this guy's eyes are somehow connected to this character's protrusions or horns, so right away that makes it a really weird character, and I thought was interesting and an interesting design, so I was happy about that. And all of the background characters most of the time look really interesting. Larson has a knack at just creating interesting looking characters I want to know about. Pretty standard pose, of course, of the Savage Dragon, and you've got this spaceship here, which again is going to relate to the contents. Just want to mention, I think it's a great cover. Just again, I talked about this a few reviews ago, how sometimes he simplifies a background, and I feel like he just threw down some black ink down here, or mostly black ink, maybe left a few spaces here and there, open spaces, but then came back with the white medium to kind of define the city and cut out the windows and stuff, right? You can kind of tell, and it's very rough. Even the cars and the trucks on the road here are just basically like, a white square and 2 white dots, but he gets his point across. It works really well. And as you can definitely see from this cover, the city has been, or is very destroyed, and has been destroyed. And that's going to relate, of course, to the contents of the issue, which we're going to look at right now. So unless you already knew, and if this is not enough of a hint, there's some sort of crossover going on in the late 90s between Image Comics and Mars Attacks, which I assume at this point the license is with Topps Comics, because here in the credits, there's a special thanks to Andy Smith, Gary Carlson, and the folks at Topps Comics, from whom I ripped off all kinds of stuff. And I'll try to point out, I think, what he's talking about. I haven't seen the actual Image Mars Attacks crossover. I might have seen some illustrations here and there, so I can't really speak to the fact if he's just going in and pulling story ideas from there, but I feel like he is in certain sequences, so I'll point those out. Great splash page of the Mars Attacks alien, right? Looks really cool. He's incorporated the logo in there and the lettering, just to clue you in even more, to kind of hit you over the head with it, which is fine. So I feel like Eric Larson just decided to kind of do an old school, tie-in issue to the crossover that was happening at that time, and that's what this feels like, kind of a Marvel crossover tie-in issue. Sometimes when I was early in my collecting days, I was collecting Infinity Gauntlet and also Incredible Hulk. So there was a Hulk issue that was a tie-in to Infinity Gauntlet. I think pretty much all or most of the Marvel regular titles at that time had some sort of tie-in to Infinity Gauntlet, except for the X-Men, because they weren't really participating in it. I think Wolverine was there, and that was about it. It was kind of an editorial thing back then, right? So credits: Eric Larson, creator, writer, pencil, inker; Chris Iliopoulos at letter, iHawk are doing the colors. Not even going to ask about film output anymore. And again, we read the special thanks. So I think, like I said, Andy Smith is possibly the artist on Mars Attacks image, and Gary Carlson more than likely the writer, I would guess. He's the guy who writes, I was going to say Voltron, but Vanguard as well, a character that Eric Larson brought back to image from an earlier part of his career where he was working with Gary Carlson on Vanguard. Vanguard, I believe, is a Gary Carlson character, not an Eric Larson character. So all throughout this issue, we're going to see a couple of shots of these spaceships here. And what I feel like he's done, which is smart artistically, you're going to have to draw these a whole bunch of times, right? At all trying to get them at pretty much the same angle. So I feel like he drew one, right? And then he photocopied it and statted it and made it small, or obviously probably digitally at this point, did that all, you copy paste and then you shrink it, and, did most, if not all of this digitally, except for the ones that are at different angles or a lot kind of smaller, I guess. Then you can just draw the actual loop shape and that's all you have to do. And the reason they do look a little bit different is I feel like this kind of detail they added on top, this kind of shadow reflective thing, whatever you want to call it, these scribbles, was not part of that stat. So everything that's been statted everywhere, right? Even the screen tone gets smaller and seems to be pretty much the same. But then once he statted all of those and put them all over the page, then he came in with a pen and gave them all a distinctive kind of shadow reflection thing. And that's why you don't get a sense that they're all exactly the same ship. A smart way of doing it instead of using the exact same kind of drawing. If this reflection was everywhere, then you would probably spot that it's the same ship. So these are the sequences I feel like he's talking about when he ripped off Gary Carlson and Andy Smith. Maybe the sequences where he's explaining what's going on in the actual crossover or overall in the image universe, right? Of the Mars Attacks characters attacking Earth. Good way to introduce Dragon is he's almost always in bed with a lady. Don't even know which one this is. He's slept with a bunch of them at this point. Rapture for sure. Rita Metermaid, right, who we're going to see later in this issue, and now he's in there with another young lady. So to get the Dragon into the story, you just got a few Mars Attack aliens who try to sneak up on him. Obviously, that's not going to work. And yeah, I think it's clever the way almost he structured the first few pages, where I feel like we're getting, hints of the story from the actual crossover here. And he's probably taken or lifting some panels from that story, or at least referencing them. And then he kind of throws in a cool shot of, what's happening and going on with the Dragon and the secondary characters there, Freak Force at this point in Vanguard, during the alien invasion, right? Gets beamed up by Vanguard here. So Vanguard's been, as he says, teleporting, troops around for Super Patriot around Earth. And then the Dragon asks him to teleport him somewhere else. And he asks him to go to Mars, which is a smart idea. So I guess his plan is to attack them where they're from, right? It's called Mars Attacks. So you got to assume that they're aliens from Mars. Even the Vicious Circle is getting in on it, right? They're the bad guys usually, but I guess in a crisis like this, even they have to fight off the aliens, right? So you almost kind of get a bit of sympathy for them, to a certain extent, a little bit of sympathy for the Vicious Circle. There's that ship again. Pretty sure it's statted. Copy pasted, I guess we'll say at this point, digitally. What I suspect are more sequences from the actual crossover, and boom, we got Savage Dragon on Mars. How do we know that? Well, it's the red planet, right? Eric Larson using that recycled star background that he probably still uses to this day. Just a digital back file so he doesn't have to redraw stars and starry backgrounds over and over. I mean, it's a pretty balls to the wall issue, I gotta say, right? Now we're slipping into more just direct A story with Savage Dragon and Chicago specific characters. We got Dung here throwing his shit around on the aliens. And yeah, it's just basically one big kind of fight issue, which is fun, which Eric Larson draws amazingly, right? Barbaric picking up huge insects and the like, Mighty Man punching a giant robot in the back. Great kind of Kirby dynamics going on pretty much everywhere. And I don't know if I've talked about the coloring in a while, but yeah, still doing a great job. They've pulled back again. Most image titles I feel that I'm reviewing past maybe 94, 95. It feels like that computer coloring has kind of gone as far as it can. And now they're just pulling back a bit and kind of relaxing on it. So we're not getting as many kind of modulated colors and stuff, though they're still there. But the modulation is either a little more subtle, like you can see here on the dragon with some darker and lighter greens, or, you know, sometimes just almost flat, like this, you know, plane here where there's just a bit of a lighter magenta here and a pretty flat magenta everywhere else. Just a few highlights here, there's some shadows and some changing tones. You get a bit of a gradient here, which makes sense to create that sense of depth. Yeah, it just feels like the colorists are also just more adept now at separating foreground from background and not afraid to use still the 90s, so I'll just say slightly less saturated colors. Still, the colors are pretty saturated, but I personally like that very much. So great down shot of these guys. Super Patriot. I've mentioned how many times I respect artists who can do that well. Obviously, Larson can draw pretty well from every darn angle. I feel like we're really getting the definitive dragon as well now, where, you know, the really wide upper body and the narrow waist and the small legs. Like he wasn't always like that, and it feels like, you know, right here he really almost takes on. When did Tom Strong start being published? A little later than this, but he's got the kind of, I call the Tom Strong proportions. And another shot of those copy pasted ships. Still works really well here. So they've managed to push off the invasion because basically Dragon destroying all their means and their materials on Mars, the gas, the fuel that they need to come back to Earth. So he's figuring he won't see him for a while, and of course he's just sent back home and kind of has a bit of time to take in all the destruction that's actually happened right across that crossover. So the tie-in at least is more direct than some of the Marvel ones. You know, for example, with some of the classic crossovers, Infinity Gauntlet, that whole Infinity trilogy, right? Some of the tie-ins were a little tenuous at best, and maybe, you know, we're only doing that for the slight bump in sales it might give you. What a great splash, though, of all the destruction there. Again, an interesting angle, too. Not that easy to draw. And kind of referencing, like, you know, almost like the cover becomes a panel. Sometimes covers do that, sometimes they don't, but they should represent a scene from the comic most times, or at least, you know, make a reference to it. So I feel like, you know, this is just prior to Dragon, you know, fighting this other guy that we're going to be introduced to. Although, again, the dress code is a little bit different because on the cover he is dressed in his cop shirt and not here. Here he's just wearing one of Vanguard's, apparently. Little bit of B story with our buddy, his name's William, right? Yeah, so our long-haired police officer here. So he, I guess, with the invasion going on, he had already asked Rita out for a date. So I guess they figured, you know, if we're all about to die, might as well, you know, do something enjoyable while we're waiting for that sudden death. And just for some reason, although she had been his, you know, dream girl for the last 30 odd issues, I think, or close to, the Savage Dragon, now that he's finally, you know, bedded her, he's got a look on his face like he's, you know, not quite sure with, you know, there's something that happened there that I guess we're going to find out about later. This is where, you know, Erik Larsen establishes those B and C subplots, and so we don't know what's going on, but we know something's going on, and that'll pay off later at some point for sure. I don't know if we'd ever seen him without his glasses. Kind of looks like Jesus, doesn't he? Pin up by Francesco. Oh yeah, so I was looking at this one. Pretty cool artist. I don't know where he's from, what he's doing. I've never seen any of his comics. Somewhat similar and very close to Larson's depiction of the dragon. I think he does him really well. He gets the fin right. I see something I've never seen before, so that was interesting to see the fin kind of have holes and kind of be a little bit beat up there, because I don't think Larson's done that yet. Maybe he's waiting for a specific moment for that. I don't think the idea has not crossed his mind, but kind of just fun. I'm pretty sure it's the first time I see any kind of damage on the dragon on the fin specifically. So pretty solid artist. Just weird things over here with the hand. These lines that he's kind of added, which I assume imply motion. Just very odd to me. And he's got these flashing kind of reflective effects on some of the armor. You know, I think it works here kind of all right here. I don't know if this bit's supposed to be that shiny. To me here, unfortunately, it almost looks like it's a little high. Maybe her anus is down here, but it feels like she's kind of farting or splurting out of her ass, something. And so yeah, it just ends up looking a little bit like a spludge shot is all I'll say. But pretty good work overall. Interesting, you know, design on the ripped clothing, almost kind of electric. And this guy too, Kun. He's doing Freak Force number 2. So I guess Freak Force ended and he started over. I don't know exactly what's going on with the numbering. I remember Freak Force going at least to issue 10 or 12, and the original issue 2 was drawn by that guy, Victor Bridges, I believe his name was. So don't know what this is exactly. Artwork really seems interesting to me. I like it. Once again, kind of works with the Larson aesthetic, I guess. You know, I will say with Larson, occasionally he would, you know, have artists doing secondary series where the styles were quite different, but for the most part, there was something kind of connecting all the artistic styles, I found, and it made it a little more consistent amongst all the secondary titles that Eric Larson was putting out for Image that obviously were tying into Savage Dragon. So a few scenes of carnage, people, you know, stacking up the bodies, and boom, we get our splash and our in-comic introduction to the character on the cover. I don't know if we ever even get his name in here, but yeah, I really like the design, kind of a Kirby monster, and like I said, that weird kind of connection that they've got here through this guy's eyes, and we get a really cool Kirby-esque, super intense action sequence between Dragon and this huge kind of dragon gargoyle character. And so the sense that we get is obviously that this guy is kind of the giant monster's handler, or like I said, he's got a connection. He's what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of symbiotically attached to him, almost like Avatar, if you've seen an Avatar. So we find out that this guy is basically part of the vicious circle, and that's why he's attacking Dragon. So here, Dragon actually is throwing rock, succeeds in knocking this guy off the back, and you realize that this guy's actually, the monster actually has two kind of pointy horns there. So what's going on? But as soon as the connection is severed, you know, Dragon just basically gets his ass handed to him. And the dialogue kind of clues you in here. Enough, boy. Almost like he's talking to his dog or something. And you see the guy's eyes, which again, weird body horror, which Eric Larson does well. He's got like two like anuses instead of eyes. I mean, that's really what they look like to me, like two kind of belly buttons or anuses, something like that. And it is a little bit unsettling to see him kind of get back on this character's back and just jab his horns into his eyes. So I like the originality of that and that design. You know, it's something I haven't really seen before, you know, and I don't think I've seen since, at least in as much as connecting through the eyes there. Very odd, and I like it. Very interesting. I love the way he, you know, he does the vertical panel. You know, most of the action's kind of down at the bottom here of the character, you know, from far away through this destroyed building. But like all this debris here, and almost abstract, but like, you know, you've got some of the plumbing that's been broken down and timber and stuff. Really good job here of conveying that. This arm took like, you know, 10 seconds to draw, but I really like it. And then, you know, those thin, long, stretched out lines really add to the movement, right? With these little bits of debris and everything. Just these little things you can do to imply movement. And of course, the reveal that Cyberface, I guess, is back in good health. They figured out a way to keep him alive, and he's basically just telling Savage Dragon that the Vicious Circle is triumphant and back in control. So the Vicious Circle taking full advantage of the situation of the alien invasion to assert their control over Chicago, and I guess we'll find out if they're successful next issue and next review. There's some interesting fan art here, like this one here. Just thought there was a bit of a almost like similar to John Cleary kind of vibe. I've talked about him before. He was kind of a McFarlane clone for a while. Not that this looks particularly McFarlane-ish, but almost looks more like Cleary specifically. But I kind of like it. And I thought this was fun, actually. Just kind of a Savage Dragon Sin City homage. Fin City. Not the most clever thing, but I enjoyed it. And then I found out that there's a Savage Dragon trade paperback, A Talk with God. I guess includes all of these issues here. Don't know if these can be reprinted, right? Because he's got Wildstar and the Max in there, and those characters are owned by someone else. There's Hellboy as well. There's Spawn here. I don't know. No, excuse me. Well, there was a crossover with Hellboy, but he's not in this trade specifically. So I wonder if, you know, when he's advertising this trade back in 97, so for sure he's got the rights for the trade there, but I don't know if there's issues with these issues eventually being reprinted, or if he's got some sort of deal with the guys and saying, you know, if I reprint a trade paperback, then you know, I can throw it in there and include it. Obviously, it could mess with a lot of the storylines in Savage Dragon and the continuity of the trade if you couldn't include some of these issues, at least some of them. Maybe some you could pull out, but not all of them. Anyways, that's enough for me for today, guys. So that is my review of the Savage Dragon issue number 37. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. We're trying to hit that first 500 kind of mark on YouTube so they officially recognize us as a channel and start giving us a little bit of help with the algorithm there and throwing us out there to other people who might be interested in my channel and my reviews. So everyone out there, thank you so much for watching and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby Volume 1, issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.
Like! Subscribe!